What's happening, guys? Happy Wednesday, and thank you for joining another special episode of Your Welcome. I'll tell you, there has been so many moving parts since we have talked last, so let's start with Jon Jones. Jon was cleared by USADA, and to try to explain that maybe a little bit clearer, by cleared, I don't mean that he was found innocent. I mean that his suspension was given, and a total of 15 months. I think he's got like another 30 days and he will be there, which clears him in terms of the doubt and the clout that he was under. It was explained very clearly to everybody on multiple occasions from multiple commissions as well as USADA that a second-time offender, which Jon was, had a minimum of 2 years and essentially a maximum of 4. Based on the egregiousness of the offense, it didn't necessarily come with a ceiling. It definitely came with a floor of 2 years. It didn't necessarily come with a ceiling of 4. They could go up to a lifetime ban, but that was not really on the table. There wasn't a precedent for that. So it was believed to be 2 to 4, and we've covered that here a number of times. They ended up with 15 months. I think he's at 14. Like I said, he's got roughly 30 days, which would open up his eligibility for the Madison Square Garden card, as I have personally speculated on a number of times, with no evidence, just making a guess, see what ends up happening out there. Things then got a little bit more interesting because, again, as it's been explained to us on a number of occasions, he was facing a minimum of 2 years, and we have seen much less egregious offenses, and by egregious, I am defining that to say the substance found in his system. We have seen substances that have been less, substances that have been medicine, substances that have been prescribed by doctors, and somebody given much more time. We saw a Nick Diaz situation where it was a lifetime ban for marijuana. We saw a Wanderlei Silva situation where it was a lifetime ban. Both of these, of course, they worked through. But a lifetime ban for Wanderlei Silva, who tested positive for nothing. He didn't even do the test. They found that to be so egregious that they banned him for life. Jon was found with an illegal substance, and I'm not talking about a banned substance. I'm talking about if he was found in possession of this, the police would put him in handcuffs. Illegal substance. And they ended up with 15 months. Well, we need an explanation. How'd you get to 15 months when you told us all it was 2 years? So the explanation came out. And the explanation was that there was an article within the USADA rules that if Jon was to provide them with substantial information, and the clause went on and on from there, but essentially if he was to provide them with substantial information, which means if he was to turn other people in, that there is a way within the USADA rules to give him a less sentence than the 2 years that was explained to everybody on multiple occasions. So that is the category that he fell under. And the way that worked took a couple of terms since we've talked last as well. First off, it was explained that he has already given information and will have to continue to give information, or they can revoke the sentence and resentence him. All right, fair enough. The speculation begins to come with who would Jon give? And in the world of, and it doesn't matter if it's the FBI, it doesn't matter if it's a DA's office, and apparently it doesn't matter with USADA in terms of this being a clause. But the way that this works is that you have to be able to shoot upwards. You can't shoot down. So who is Jon going to give that's bigger than Jon? Jon Jones is the biggest fish on the hook in the world of MMA. The gym that he trains out of and the speculation that he's turning on his own teammates and things along these lines, fine, let's just go along with that because we don't know. But let's just see that theory through. The problem with that theory is there is nobody in that gym that is a bigger fish than Jon Jones. He could give up 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 teammates. They still don't equal one Jon Jones. So that's where I think it starts to get a little bit interesting. I don't have an answer for you. I have a guess. I'll go ahead and make my guess, but I think if I'm going to do it with any level of responsibility, I have to say to you guys in as clear of words as I know how to speak that I don't know what I'm talking about in terms of having any evidence. I just have a guess. Having been through the system before, no deal like that was ever offered to me. There was nothing. I never knew this existed. I've never heard anybody speak about it. USADA has never spoke about it that I've ever seen before. And I see this stuff. I study this stuff. And then I bring it to you guys so that you don't have to waste your time studying it. I've never heard of this. Doesn't mean it wasn't there. Just never heard of it before. So if you were to begin to speculate who would John turn on, I don't believe that he's going to be able to turn on MMA, meaning fellow teammates, fellow guys that he's heard about. And it has to be substantial information. He cannot come in and give speculative rumor. He would have to give information that I know. Here are phone numbers, here are dates, here are the guys, here are the substances, things along those lines, if not that criteria exactly and to the T. And he has to continue to do it, which would be tough. That would be a little bit tough when they outed him as an informant. Be a little bit tough for John to be invited to some of those circles and be able to gather that information. So I'm going to jump around a little bit, but let's try to tie this all together. So fast forward the tape, which would bring us to Monday. His manager, Malky, went on a show, and it was either Ariel's old show or it's Ariel's new show. I don't know who he was on, but Malky came out and he said, hey, not so fast. Before you guys think Jon Jones is a snitch under that clause that USADA has put out, John could also be giving you information on himself. He could also just be telling personal stories and revealing things that have not been revealed before. Tie that in with something else that you guys may not know. USADA will not come out and speak out on people they are investigating. USADA is very quiet, but USADA does have a deal, and they will call and they will tell you this up front, which is, if you go and you speak, we will respond. So if you want to just let this go, if you want to handle this behind closed doors, we can do that. But if you go public, we're going to come right behind you. We won't go first, but we will go. And they'll tell you this up front. So when Malky came out and did that, then USADA responded. And USADA made it very clear, no, he has already given information and he will continue to give us information. That is exactly what it means. It means we flipped him. He is now an informant. He's already given info and he will continue to give info, or we will revoke and revise this 15-month suspension. Okay, fair enough. It just still leaves me, and I am still in the vein of the conversation of Chael does not know. I'm going to make my guess. I've heard different guesses out there. I'm going to make mine. I don't believe that John could point the finger at anybody in MMA, including to give 3, 4, or 5 guys up and go, well, 5 is better than 1. I don't think so. I don't think the DA, I can tell you the DA doesn't work that way. I can tell you the feds don't work that way, and I don't think that USADA would work that way either. I believe that it has to be a bigger fish. Now, here's something that people aren't taking into consideration. USADA will look at a hierarchy, and they will look at it differently. By example, USADA will look at a coach as a different level, a level above an athlete, okay? So if Jon Jones wasn't going to give them athletes that were bigger fish than him, but he could give them a coach and say that a coach has knowledge and helps to facilitate this. USADA would look at that, even though that coach could be a smaller name and a smaller fish, but they would look at that as a higher level. None of what I'm suggesting here is that Jon Jones has turned in one of his coaches or that his coaches have done anything like that. I'm just offering you a backstory to make sure you understand how USADA works. They would then look at a level above the coach to the actual dealer, the actual supplier, even if that guy didn't have a bigger name and a bigger headline, but he had some level of an empire, some level of a Rolodex that they could go tap into. That's still, neither of them, I'm just giving you backstory. That's not actually my prediction. My own prediction, I think that he had a piss in the punch bowl and he's turned on the NFL. That's my own guess. I think that he's given him fish outside of the world of MMA, which has not yet been considered, but that is my own personal guess. I base that on zero evidence, just an understanding that I just laid out for you, which is you cannot shoot down and make a deal. You have to be able to shoot up, all right? The only reason they made a deal with Sammy the Bull, who confessed to 19 murders, is because Sammy the Bull would give him John Gotti. You have to be able to go up in deal-making. And you can't go, well, I got 5 guys in exchange for me. If they're 5 undercard guys and they don't have names, it's not going to work that way. And any of these organizations, whether you like it or not, will openly tell you the bigger headline we can get, the better. If we can make an example out of a really big fish, we'll do it. And we'll attach our own names to it and the credibility of our own organization to it. So they want a bigger fish. And I'm not here to believe that anybody out of that camp, or even any multiple people out of that camp, all together equal one Jon Jones. Which makes me think he might have gone in a different direction completely. So what do you do with him now? Where do you put him now? I'm still very bullish on Madison Square Garden. All right, you got to put the USADA thing behind you. I mean, whatever that was and whatever you make of that, go ahead. But we're talking about two separate conversations now, which is the fact that now Jon is back. He is now eligible to apply and gain a license. He has a contract with an organization known as the UFC. So he's going to go back to competing. We just have to guess when. And Dana has said that it will be 2019. I think he might have even used the word early 2019. Maybe. Dana, of course, would know. But there could be some moving parts there where Dana could change his mind as well, right? There could be some moving parts. Maybe he wants him to fight on Madison Square Garden, but he's having licensing issues. That fight's going to take place in New York. Perhaps New York is demanding behind the scenes that he comes out and he sits front and center for a commission hearing, and the commission doesn't even meet in time for him to do that. So there is some things that aren't just as easy as, okay, when do you want Jon to fight? All right, great, throw him in there. There's much more that goes on behind the scenes, and there's much more boxes that have to be checked before he could go and do it. I still believe that they are going to work towards that and succeed at getting him in there on the Madison Square Garden card in November. If we were to take a look at it, though, and try to figure out who he's going to fight, of which I have predicted will be Gustafsson, and you were to take a look at some of the things that Gustafsson has said, it doesn't appear that fight's done. It doesn't. I had somebody call me with a very random speculation that I'm personally short on, but I love speculation, so it was a fun conversation. And they said, well, I noticed that Daniel Cormier was mysteriously absent this weekend for the UFC's coverage. He wasn't on the pre-show. He wasn't on the post-show. He wasn't on the live broadcast. Is it because Daniel Cormier is in training because he's going to be fighting Jon Jones? I sure don't think so. I really don't think so, but I thought it was a fun conversation. I mean, how do we get to the conclusion that DC and Jon Jones is going to happen in 6 or 7 weeks, all because Daniel wasn't on TV on Saturday night? I'm not quite sure how we got there, but I'll listen. Daniel's always a likely suspect for Jon. And then you've got the PR battle too, right? All of this has to be weighed against the PR mess of what do you do with Jon? Is it best to just let this lie? You know, the fighters are turning on. They don't like that he snitched. They don't like that he took this deal. The public doesn't love that. I mean, what do you do? Well, the bottom line is you move forward. That's the answer. And you move forward sooner rather than later. So I don't know where the Jon situation goes. He has been very quiet. He was saying more before the USADA deal came out, before this information came out. He's been quieter in the last 6 days than he was in the last 6 weeks. What do you make of that, and where do you go from here? And what's the fallout going to be? And who did he give them? And it has to be substantial information. It can't just be rumors. So what do you have? You've got all sorts of moving parts. You have to do this in conjunction with the fact that it was also given a 3-month reduction because they believe that there was absolutely no intent for Jon to have taken the substance. And that's a very fascinating story as well. When you come in there with a guy who lacks credibility, and you come away with absolutely no evidence, but you believe that he had no knowledge, it would be very reasonable. And guys, if I may stop down for just a second, this is not a Bury Jon Jones segment, but it could come off as that. Because there's not really a bright side here to Jon Jones that I can present to you. But I'm not sharing an opinion with you and attempting to bury Jon. I'm just attempting to recount and tell you this story the way that it happened for the information that I was able to gather from the media and pass it on. So this isn't a Barry John, but I will fully admit that there's not really a pot of gold at the end of this story here. Okay, it's not a wonderful situation, but this is the one that he's found himself in. So they ruled that they believed that John did not take this intentionally. That is a fascinating belief to come to when you have a guy who's failed 3 tests. He has 2 strikes against him. The cocaine did not actually count as a strike, if you guys will recall that story. Cocaine was not on the ban list, even though he tested positive for it, so he didn't get a strike. To set that clear, so he's got 3 failed tests with 2 strikes. Next one is a lifetime ban. Okay. As the rules have been explained to us, and as we have found out, we are fiercely going to adhere to the rules that we make up on the spot, but there you go. But they ruled that he had absolutely no intent. Now, that was a fascinating one for me, because they said that they believed. That's the word that they used. I'm quoting. They believed that he had no intent. So they gave him a 3-month reduction. They proved that Yoel Romero had no intent. They proved that Tim Means had no intent. Vandelay never tested positive for anything. Nick Diaz tested positive for a lawful substance that was against the rules. John tested positive for not only a banned substance, an absolutely illegal substance. BJ Penn took an IV, which is legal. But it was ruled that he took too much of a legal substance. And these guys all did time. They all did time. A minimum of 6 months. BJ, Yoel, Timmy, a minimum of 6 months. John got a 3-month reduction because they believed that he did it with no intent. To explain for you guys, faith. The word faith is to come to a conclusion in the absence of evidence. It is to believe something with no evidence. That is what faith means. Belief in something means that you have evidence and you have come to a particular conclusion. They use the word belief, and I found that to be interesting. Why is it that you believe that? Because a reasonable person is not going to fall for that straw man fallacy. Here, let me present to you guys a far more reasonable scenario where John Jones did not know he was taking something banned. Okay? John Jones tests hot. Here's my scenario. John Jones tests hot. John Jones gets suspended. John Jones continues to get tests, and he continues to piss hot. He continues to defend himself. He continues to deny. He continues to say, I have no idea. I have no license. I have no fight coming up. I'm in the hot seat. I don't know where this is coming from. And then John Jones pisses hot again, and again. That logically would draw you to the conclusion that he does not know where it's coming from. If he did not know where it was coming from and he continued the same behaviors, he would continue to get the same result, which in this case would be a failed test for the same substance. An irrational train of thought would be that John tests hot one time, gets caught, and never tests hot for that substance again. That would be irrational. That would be illogical. If he is continuing the same behaviors with the same substances and the same foods and living in the same conditions and doing everything the same but getting a different result, a logical person would understand that something had to change. Why does your friendly host Chael Sonnen not test hot anymore? Because I knew where it was coming from and I quit doing it. Do you guys see the problem with the logic here? I will give you guys a story. Very dark story. And I don't mean to compare the two. I'll just use an example. Maybe you guys saw this. It was a huge national news. It was even made into a mini-series. It was featured on Unsolved Mysteries at one point, if you guys remember that show. And now they made a movie about it. A woman and a man have a child, a little boy. True story. And they rush him to the hospital. A little boy's sick, and they run a bunch of tests on him. And they find out, they determine that the baby is being poisoned. The baby is sick and he's being poisoned. And the husband and wife go, well, that's impossible. We've never had a babysitter. We'd never let him outside of our possession. As a matter of fact, I'm still breastfeeding. He hasn't even had food yet. So the investigators come into the house. They search the house up and down because by mom and dad's own admittance, it would have to be mom or dad. Nobody else has touched the baby. They're confessing to that much. They go into the garage and they find 2 bottles of antifreeze. One of them is sealed and closed, and one of them's opened, and a little bit is missing. Quarter of a bottle. Well, they realize that one of the active ingredients in antifreeze is what the baby is being poisoned with. So now they know it was either mom or dad, and they have the actual substance being used. So they try them both for poisoning the baby. The dad is found not guilty, and they lock the mother up for life. The baby continues to get sick and continues to be diagnosed by these small-town doctors as being poisoned by antifreeze. So now they're going, oh my gosh, we've locked up the wrong parent. We have the wrong parent. What do we do? So they take the little boy from the father into state's custody and try to figure out, do we let the mom out or is the mom and dad both in it? We got to lock him up. This is a big mess. All the while, mom, who's now incarcerated in solitary confinement, I might add, happened to be pregnant at the time. So X amount of months later, she gives birth to the second baby, who is separated from her instantly. Baby comes into this world and is separated by the state from the mother instantly. Never even got a hold of baby. Guess what happened to baby number 2, who mother never got to see and never went into the possession of the father because now they think they need to lock the father up too. Guess what happened to him? He was being poisoned. Now both the babies are being poisoned. They're both continually testing positive, and they're not in possession of either one of the parents. This makes national news, at which point doctors from all over the country that aren't from little small towns say, hey, you've misdiagnosed these kids. They're not being poisoned at all. That's a hereditary thing. Here's what it's called. Oh, and by the way, there's a cure. You just have to accurately diagnose them. That was 24 years ago. Both the kids have grown up. They're healthy. Mom and dad, family, everybody's reunited. Big mistake by the state. But the lesson learned there, why did the babies keep testing positive? Why did the doctors keep believing under the same results that they were being poisoned? Because mom and dad were innocent. Had mom and dad been poisoning the babies, when you separated them from mom and dad, they would have stopped testing positive. Do you guys see the problem with the logic here? A support was added to John's theory because he only had one positive test for not just a banned substance, an illegal substance, an imprisonable substance. But he never tested positive again. Yet through the basic logic, that helped to clear him. Am I saying this clear? Are you guys understanding how that's the reverse? That's upside down for what would make sense to a reasonable person? This isn't a conviction of John. I know, I realize how this sounds. It's not. I'm just telling you the facts that were laid out. I'm telling you the conclusion that was come to, which is the reverse of logic and the opposite of what they told everybody. And it is not in line with how other guys were treated, including a guy like BJ Penn, who officially has a strike against him for taking a legal substance, but taking too much of it. You guys figure that one out. That is exactly what happened with BJ. He took a legal substance. They ruled he took too much. You guys figure out how that's a ban, but it was. And he sat. And he got bad press and bad headlines, and it's got a strike against. Really weird. Really weird. So it's important, I guess, just that you know the rules and that you understand them. And we'll see where it goes from here. I still do believe that there's going to be something very special at Madison Square Garden. And I think that unintentionally, it's turned into really great marketing. I've been in more conversations with people, hey, who do you think's going to headline Madison Square Garden? You know, one thing about Dana White is he's not a poker player, and he does not bluff. I mean, he doesn't. You can go back and look at his history. I remember when Dana was making these claims and people saying, oh, he's crazy and he's just being a promoter. Then sure enough, he'd follow through on his word, and it would happen. I mean, from the growth of the sport to national television deals to publicly traded companies coming in as sponsors of the company, everything that he ever said happened. And he said, we are going to give you a blowout main event for Madison Square Garden. Now, the only reason I offer you that is because I'm not confident that the card isn't great the way it is. I'm not confident that if push comes to shove, you elevate Diaz and Poirier to a 5-round fight, make them the main event, and everybody goes home happy. I'm not confident of that. I think that works. I just think Dana is going to do, I think he's going to do something great and special. And when you come out and you start to speculate what that is, we did all commonly believe that would be revealed in New York last week at the press conference between Conor and Khabib. We believed that because they were in New York, because MSG, for those of you that are geographically impaired, happens to be in New York, and it was a press conference where you would announce major press. So we had that conclusion. But when Dana didn't do it, we all looked at that and go, well, yeah, of course he didn't do it. Why would he do it today? Why would he do anything that could overshadow the biggest fight in the sport's history? Why would he do anything today for a card that's 7 weeks away when he's promoting a card that's 3 weeks away? Once again, Dana gets it right. Dana did it exactly right. All of our predictions were wrong, but we should have been wrong. He should have announced it that day. Didn't matter if they were in New York. He had other business that day. Once again, Dana got it right. I'm not sure, and tickets go on sale tomorrow for the MSG card. So could we find out very quickly? Could we find out? Now, I might be wrong. I think tickets might go on sale today. I'd have to look that up. But the point is they're running out of time if they want to announce their main event in conjunction with an on-sale date. What's to say they do? What's to say that the point I made a moment ago isn't spot on, which the card's pretty damn good the way it is? What's to say that they don't wait until you're fading to black and rolling the credits on October 6th, where you have more eyeballs from this market than you're ever going to have before, and you put it on the back end of that show? If you guys will remember, that's how they rolled out the Brock Lesnar fight, Brock Lesnar's return at UFC 200. There was a pay-per-view going on. They had some B-roll put together, and out of nowhere, boom, he's back, and Brock Lesnar's face pops up. It was a cool, dramatic way to do it. Didn't even have an opponent announced. So what's to say they're not going to do that on October 6th when the MSG card isn't for another month? That's more than enough time to build anticipation and hype for a retail product that's going on sale 30 days later, roughly, and not get in the way of the product that is being sold on October 6th. So, in conclusion, I'm sticking with my Jon Jones theory, though I will fully admit as each day goes by, it gets weaker and weaker. I just am forced with the fact that they said it's going to be a major fight. Diaz and Poirier is an anticipated fight, so that's our bar. It's got to be above that, and I don't know anybody with any free time, with any spots open on their dance card, that could fill in and be a bigger and better and more anticipated fight than Poirier versus Diaz. I don't know of one. I couldn't offer you a guess. I've heard guesses that I find ridiculous. I heard George St. Pierre. That's ridiculous to me. I wouldn't even come to you guys with that. George doesn't work that way, and he doesn't fill in short notice. Daniel Cormier sitting out one pay-per-view. Now he's being speculated. Hey, why is he sitting at home? What's he getting ready for? What's he training for? As much as I want to laugh at that, I don't have anything better to offer you. Maybe the guy that made the call to me and offered me that, maybe he's on to something. Maybe a little RP's on to something. I don't know. But it sure has, from a marketing standpoint, been fun to not know. It's been fun to speculate. It's been fun to guess. I think we've all got a kick out of it. I don't think you can run a business that way. I don't know if we're going to be in this same spot again time after time. This is the new promotion. We know the card and we're not going to tell you what it is. Ha ha ha. I don't think so. But I think for this one time, for this first time, I think it's been great. I do. I really think that it's been fun. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with putting John on it. I don't think from a PR perspective that you need to put him on ice until, early 2019 or get him right back in the mix right now. I don't see any different. Either way, there's going to be some blows, there's going to be some pushback, and you're going to have to move forward. So we'll see where that all goes. The press conference, back up to that. Awesome. I thought it was incredible. You have to understand when you go into that press conference last week. I'm trusting that you guys saw it. I saw some report, something crazy. I mean, it was something, I want to say 4 million people watched it, something like that. With the reruns and the clips and the social medias and the YouTubes and the live feeds and the ESPN News, just everybody that covered it, something like 4 million eyeballs had seen that, which is a raging success. But yeah, back up to the day that it happened. Conor went into that thing, and there was only 2 options, okay? And the reason I bring up Conor, this isn't Khabib's world. We weren't expecting a lot from Khabib, and there wasn't a lot that Khabib could do. He's a humble guy. He's a gentleman. He's a sportsman. And this is not his native tongue. Okay, it's a press conference where words are all that matter. Not just words matter. Words are all that matters. Khabib was up against it a little bit, so we'll focus on Conor. Conor only had 2 options, okay? Don't forget, this press conference taking place in New York blocked all fans from coming, so it's just the media. So the energy in the room is very light. There's not crowds waving his flags that have tailgated before this thing, and they show up drunk, and they're partying, they're chanting for their countrymen, and hanging on every word he says. It's a different environment, and it's one that he has not been in before. So of his 2 options, he could come out, and he could be his boisterous, flamboyant self that everybody's hoping for, or he could come in and just call this one in. Hey, the energy's not here. I don't have any idea why we're doing it. I live in Ireland. He lives in Russia. You flew us both to New York to promote a fight that's in Vegas in a room that nobody's at. I'm out. Ask me your questions, get on with it, and let me go about my day. That was a very reasonable assumption, particularly because that's exactly what he did in his final press conference with Floyd Mayweather. The room was different. The energy, I was there. The room was different. The energy was different. It was mainly media. It was mainly insiders, this guy's entourage and that guy's entourage and the undercard and their coaches and their entourage. It was just a different feel. Floyd went first, and Floyd came up pretty stoic. It wasn't the brash bravado from Floyd. Conor went second. He kind of took his cues from Floyd. He came in a little bit down, too. They had a weigh-in coming the next day. They had a weight cut. They had some stress. They just had some other stuff going on. It ended up being a pretty bland atmosphere. Conor came out, okay. If you want to talk about firing on all cylinders, he had a machine gun in each hand. He had a machete tied to his back, and he had clips in his sock. It was fire. And there is nobody that could match him. And he beat Khabib at every turn. And poor Khabib was outmanned from Jump Street. We understand that. But when you're breaking down a press conference and you're going to try this fight by words, body language, and ultimately public opinion, this was a slaying like no other. And Conor came hot, and he addressed every issue. And it doesn't matter what the facts are. It's whoever says it last and says it the most compelling with a microphone in his hand on the stage. And that's exactly what Conor did. He addressed the bus issue, which was such a black eye that he left in handcuffs under the jurisdiction of the DA and ultimately in front of a judge with a lawyer in tow. It was a bad action. He steered right into it. He turned it on Khabib. He said, why didn't you get off the bus? He said, the very first, don't bring up the dolly. Don't bring up the people that went to the hospital. The very first thing I did, I walked up to that bus with my hands up. I showed you my hands. I showed you I was unarmed. You versus me. And you didn't get off the bus. To hell with the facts. To hell with the tape that we've all seen. To hell with the handcuffs and the DA and the judge. Boom. Conor just turned it. I couldn't believe it. I heard him say that. He tried to take credit. He did take credit for coming in unarmed and displaying his hands to a 4,000-pound object known as a bus. proclaiming. I get that Khabib just happened to be looking and was supposed to see that and know what that meant. I have no idea. Who cares? It doesn't matter. It was a press conference. He proclaimed, I came in, I showed you my hand so you knew I was unarmed. They went back and forth. I mean, this thing was a mess. Khabib was doing the best he could. He was just outgunned here. And at one point, Conor had one of the best lines. It was the best line of the press conference and one of the better lines that I've ever heard in MMA, and he got no credit for it. Either Khabib spoke as Conor said it or Dana spoke as Conor said it. And so it kind of like people couldn't hear it. You couldn't really hear it, but I picked up on it. And he told Khabib, you tapped the window. That's all he said is you tapped the window. But what he's alluding to is he's saying, when I came after the bus, you had enough. You tapped the window. You found your way out. You surrendered. It was a simple line. It was quick. It was, if you guys think about that, it was a brilliant line. It was absolutely brilliant. And Khabib had made many suckers' mistakes in the press conference, which is he tried to ask Conor questions. Every time Khabib thought he had a very logical point that if you just focused on for a moment, if you just answer my questions while I interrogate you, you will burn yourself, you will run out of rope and make yourself look like a fool. The problem that Khabib had in that is that Conor is not under subpoena to be there. Conor has no obligation to take a question from anybody, including Khabib. So he didn't. When he ignored Khabib and dismissed Khabib, he made Khabib look small. He made him look unworthy. He made him look like the kid in class with his hand up that the teacher's ignoring. It's very simple. It's a very simple tactic. I am only pointing this out to you guys so when you go out and you watch these press conferences and you come away with an emotion and a feeling, when you come out revved up, I'm identifying for you why. I'm identifying for all of the fighters that listen to this show, no matter how many times they've been setting that damn cage up and they've been doing these press conferences and flying people in from all over the world. When somebody shows up at this thing all dressed up and grabs the microphone and says, I don't have anything to say, I just want to fight, and puts it down as though they're going to get an applause from the crowd, and they never do, and they find themselves uninvited to the next press conference, which means they've been removed from main event or co-main event status, don't act surprised. You've got to deliver at these things. Somebody's going to be the hammer and somebody's going to be the nail. And there is a misconception in this sport from the beginning of time. And it's the same misconception that Khabib is under. And again, let me say, much like I had to do a moment ago and say this isn't a Barry John Jones, this isn't a Barry Khabib. I'm recounting for you simply what happened. That's all I'm doing. Not giving you a prediction on the fight, not even breaking down the fight, just telling you what happened at the press conference. But there is a misconception in this sport, and it continues to happen, that if you take on a big star, a guy that makes a ton of money, a guy that sells a ton of tickets and is over with the crowd, that if you take him on and you beat him, that you assume his spot, that you now make a ton of money, that you now sell a ton of tickets, and that you are now over with the crowd. That is simply not the case. It is not true. On October 6th, Conor McGregor will wake up the biggest draw in the UFC. On October 7th, Conor McGregor will wake up the biggest draw in the UFC. There is an art and a skill to that. And the guys who are going to make it in this business and have a long career and have a legacy, whatever the hell that word means, and the guys that seem to think that that matters and is important, for those guys, they're going to understand what it is Conor brings to the table. And it's not a straight left hand and a rear teep to the body. He brings something else. He brings an energy and an emotion. And no matter what happens, including a vicious and violent and ragdoll beating, let's say Conor takes that from Khabib, a brutal, brutal beating. Conor McGregor will wake up the following morning the biggest draw in the business. And he may not be as big of a draw as he is on the 6th. It may go down. He will wake up the biggest draw in the business. Khabib will not. Not a slide to Khabib. It's just important in understanding. I see guys go after spots, and a lot of it has to do with titles, and a lot of it has to do with jealousy, and a lot of it just with a competitive spirit of, hey, that guy's where I want to be. Let me go take him down, and I'll take his spot. It's not like the olden day where if you kill the king, you become the king. It does not work that way. You have to bring other things to the table. You have to have intangibles that you bring to the table. There's not a recipe. You can't just throw in the flour and the sugar and the chocolate chips and the egg yolks and stir them up and put in the oven for 40 minutes and boom, the cookies taste the same. There's not a recipe. It is not black and white and it is not clear. Different guys bring different things to the table. Conor McGregor's last outing was a loss, just by example. It was like it never happened. You know, I'm using Conor's name because it's a big name and you guys will recognize it, but I could go ahead and use Eric Anders. Eric Anders was the fighter of the week for me, and he did it in defeat. In defeat, he was the best performance of the week. And I do not say this to be a condescending jerk. I don't know who beat him. I watched the fight. I could not produce that gentleman's name for you right now. He was a new face for me. He's tougher than hell, and I promise you I am not doing that. I don't even know who he is. I hate when people do that. I think his name was Thiago Santos, to prove my point. Nick, is that right? Okay. His name was Thiago Santos. All right, I guess I do know his name. My point to you is not to slide Thiago Santos in the slightest. My point to you is that Eric Anders fought so well and with so much heart that the conversations that I have been in since that fight happened were all about Eric Anders. They weren't about Santos. I watched the post-fight show. Dominic Cruz, who is known for being a bit cynical, I might add. Dominic Cruz goes, hey guys, there is nothing that anybody on the roster saw from Eric Anders tonight where they're going to raise their hand and go, hey, let me fight that guy next. Tremendous compliment. I have to give him the same one, though. He was not the best-looking fighter I've ever seen. He did not have the most skill. Boy, was he tough. Boy, could he take a shot. Boy, would he come forward. Boy, would he give them back. And he'd mix it up. He'd know when to go for the takedown. He'd know when to go for the left and when to go for the right. He was dog tough. He tried to get up in between rounds. He tried to get up in between rounds again. He tried to get up a third time before they finally stepped in and said, okay, we're all done here. The point I'm offering to you, not only to say something nice about a guy who deserves something nice said about him, but many times you will gain more in defeat than you do in victory. And we saw that happen with Conor versus Floyd. And you may have short-term memories, but to remind you, Conor lost that fight. To remind you, Khabib will be his next fight. To remind you, the predictions for this fight will be that it's the biggest in history. Even bigger than Conor's own fights, who currently holds the records. He's going in to outdo his own records according to the projections. And he's coming off of a defeat. There is an art to doing that. I don't offer to you that Conor is some brilliant guy who understands this art. I think a lot of it is very unintentional. But it happens all the same. A wise person would study it, and they would not just sit back and go, oh, wow, that was really great. He's a huge star. They will stop and go, why? Why was he so effective? Why was the change in his tone? Why was his refusal to answer Khabib's question? Why was making it country against country, making it political, making it personal, going after managers? Why was he doing these things? What was the cause and effect, and how did it make you feel? You have to be able to break these things down. You have to look at the number that 4 million people viewed a press conference that had absolutely no chance of a fight breaking out when the fight is only projected to have half as many people tune in and watch it. Why? Why, if we're fight fans and we love fighting, can we do double the numbers for a press conference? There was an international fight week a year ago. If I'm wrong, it was 2. The way time flies, I can never keep track. And they had done a world tour press conference, which didn't mean that they covered the world. It means they brought fighters in from everywhere. They brought them out to Vegas. They set up a huge stage. It wasn't just 2 guys like we saw with Conor and Khabib. It wasn't 4, 6 guys like we'll see for some big pay-per-views. They must have had 20 athletes up there on this. They had rows of athletes. Rows of athletes. They were covering every card you could think of. They were covering international fight. They were 6 months ahead. They were covering cards. They flew in this very lovely gal from Brazil. She was all dressed up. She had her skirt on, her dress on, and her hair on, and her makeup on, and they asked her one question. It was a charity question. Some media reporter felt bad for her, like she was being picked last in kickball on recess in 4th grade, and decides to lob her one down the middle so that she can speak since they've flown her in from a different country. And she grabs the microphone and she says, I don't like to talk. I just want to do the fight. And she puts the microphone down, and I swear to you, on everything I believe in, I would give you her name right now if I had the foggiest idea. She was never featured in a feature match again. She was never invited to another press conference. But she sat up like the cat that ate the canary that had this great answer after flying in from Brazil of saying, I've showed up to a press conference where all I am allowed to do is speak. And I showed up with nothing to say other than I don't want to say anything. Fair enough, young lady. Fair enough. Main events and co-main events come with built-in media opportunities. You cannot do one without the other. If you are put in that spot and you attempt to do one without the other, you will not be asked to come back to do one without the other. Like Vince McMahon famously said, the only thing I give anybody is an opportunity. What you do with it is up to you. Guys, thank you for listening. I've had it with you all, but I will be back on Friday. Until then, I'm Chael Sonnen, and you are welcome.